This episode of The Biggest Table is brought to you in part by Wild Goose Coffee. Since 2008, Wild Goose has sought to build better communities through coffee. For our listeners, Wild Goose is offering a special promotion of 20% off a one-time order using the code TABLE at checkout. To learn more and to order coffee, please visit wildgoosecoffee.com. I hope you enjoy this episode. Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Biggest Table. I am your host, Andrew Camp, and in this podcast, we explore the table, food, eating, and hospitality as an arena for experiencing God's love and our love for one another. And today, I'm joined by Anna Rollins. Anna is the author of Famished on food, sex, and growing up as a good girl. Her groundbreaking debut memoir examines the rhyming scripts of diet culture and evangelical purity culture, both of which direct women to fear their own bodies and appetites. Her writing has appeared in outlets like the New York Times, Slate, Electric Literature, Salon, Joyland, and more. She's also written scholarly articles about composition and writing center studies. She's an award-winning instructor who taught English in higher education for nearly 15 years. She is a 2025 Tamarack Foundation for the Arts Literary Arts Fellow. A lifelong Appalachian, she lives with her husband in West Virginia, where they're raising their 3 small children. So thanks for joining me today, Anna. It's great to have this conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to talk to you.
Yeah. So I'm going to start here because there were a few quotes from your memoir, which I highly recommend, in which you talked about this sort of disappearance. You know, you write early on that you were drawn to memoirs as a teenager, and that one particularly by Mara Hornbacher sparked this revelation. Perhaps I was drawn to disappearance because it was precisely what I had been told I, as a woman, needed to do. And then later on, towards the end of your book, you write, I had to acknowledge that for me, a diet is dangerous, that I find disappearance a most interesting project, that I have the tendency to communicate my emotions not by opening my mouth, but by shutting it up, not allowing anything or anyone in. And yet, here we are talking about your soon-to-be published book. You're, posting a lot about social media, raising awareness. And so, like, for a female who has been told her whole life to disappear, how did you get to a point where you were comfortable enough to allow us into your secrets?
Well, that's a good question. Very counter to everything I'm writing about, right?
Yeah.
So I'm writing my book examines the rhyming scripts of purity culture and diet culture, and both of those scripts teach women that you need to be small to be safe, good, and righteous. And so being outspoken and visible, it feels very counter to everything I've been taught. I would say it took a lot of time. I wrote about these topics privately for, my whole life. And then I majored in creative writing, and I got a master's related to writing. And I always wanted to write about these topics, and I would privately. And then when it would be time for me to submit something for class, I would write something quickly, something else, anything entirely other than what I actually wanted to write about. So I definitely suppressed these stories for years. And something happened to me in the pandemic. I had experienced a traumatic postpartum birth, and then the pandemic happened, and I just had this moment where I was like writing furiously about all these topics and just knew I would never be able to share any of it. And I had this moment where I realized, like, we could all die.
Yeah.
Like, I know that everyone felt that, but like, I remember exactly where I had that thought. Like, I was in the kitchen. I had just gotten my baby down for a nap. My toddler was, I don't know what he was doing. Maybe I was getting him a snack. Who knows?
Right.
But I just had this moment where I thought, like, it was maybe a month into the pandemic. My husband was an essential worker. And I thought, I could die. Like, I have this story I want to tell. Like, I want to do this more. I'd started going to therapy just before the pandemic. And we been focusing on like my struggle with disordered eating. And it was the first time I'd ever really talked to anyone about it at all. And I just remember even on the ride to the therapist's office thinking like, I probably shouldn't tell her this. You're not really supposed to talk about these things. This is so embarrassing. Like, and yeah, like I realized that I could die. And so then I started slowly showing people my writing. That's kind of how I first started opening up.
Right.
And then I had a book length manuscript that I thought was pretty good. And I started taking some classes, and I realized that if I wanted my story to be out there, I would have to do the exact opposite of what I'd believed was appropriate for me to do my entire life. And so I did that, and it didn't always feel good.
No.
It still doesn't always feel good. Like, if like when I'm showing up on social media talking about disordered eating, I mean, I like to, when I show up on social media, I will notice that I often like talk about it in academic ways, because like the memoir is very, very personal and vulnerable. Right. But like even when I'm showing up online, I like to be a little bit safer and distance myself. And I have an academic background. I taught in higher ed for almost 15 years. So I even noticed that I like kind of protect myself in that way. But yeah, I just started telling, I had something higher that I was going after. And I realized that the scripts I had been following were not going to get me there.
Yeah.
So it's not totally comfortable. It's not comfortable at all, but I've gotten, you develop resilience. You
right.
Realize that it doesn't matter so much how people perceive you. Like you can withstand judgment. I think that it's actually like been a process that's helped me feel more comfortable in my body too. Like, knowing that you might be judged and being okay with it.
I appreciate it because yeah, like reading those lines, I was like, okay, like here's somebody who is fighting against a script that she's believed her whole life, and the courage it takes to put it out there, is commendable. And so, yeah, I really appreciate you finding that courage to share your story with us.
Thank you. Yeah, yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, and so like obviously, people need to read the book to get your this full script of what you've lived in. So, but can you give the listeners sort of a glimpse into where you've come from, like who you are, like who is Anna?
Yeah. So I grew up, I'm a lifelong West Virginian. I've lived in West Virginia my whole life. And I grew up going to a small private Christian school that was Baptistic. It was more fundamentalist. And I grew up going to church. I was in a Southern Baptist church. We went 3 times a week. We were church was my whole life. I didn't really know people outside of that world.
Right.
And I was really good at church and being a Christian girl. I was really quiet and submissive, and like people often referred to me as shy, and but I was hardworking. Like I was a good girl. And I was privately struggling with disordered eating, which is something that 80% of women with at some point in their lifetime will struggle with.
Wow. And
it was a spiritual problem for me. I recognized that as a young girl. I remember, and there's a scene in Famished where I talk about this, but I was in a sermon at my Christian school, and the preacher was talking about idols of the heart. And he talked about how like idols aren't just things that like these figures you make and you bow down to. They're anything that you love more than God. And he listed things that could be idols of the heart. And he listed things like sex or drugs or relationships or blah, blah, blah. And he didn't list mine, which was my body. I was 12 or 13 years old. I was obsessively counting calories and exercising, and it was just all I could think about all the time. And I felt guilt about it because I knew that I cared about this thing more than God. I also didn't know how to stop it. It was like this thing, I didn't have the language for it. It had kind of taken over me. And I remember during that sermon, he asked us at the end, which there are so many things that I'm unpacking from my childhood about like shame and authority. And but he asked us at the end to close our eyes, bow our heads, and like raise your hand if you have an idol. And I remember like raising my hand and thinking that someone would come and help, like talk to me and help me. And then maybe finally like someone would be able to help me with this thing. And I raised my hand and no one ever came. And I like remember like running out of there afterward thinking like, oh my gosh, so embarrassing. Like I can never tell anyone about this. People just think like I'm attention seeking and like I was so embarrassed. But this obsession, this like hold that food and that it had on me, it just followed me my whole life. And eventually like I did talk to Christian leaders about it, like in this very nervous, like reserved way. And I remember being dismissed, like being told like, oh, most women struggle with that. Like, it's not that big of a deal. And like, I knew how big of a deal it was, but I just kind of learned through that, like, oh, well, like, you just can't let anyone know about this thing. Like, this is just something you have to like hide because people don't know how to handle it. They think you're attention seeking. Yeah. And so that's who I was as a child and a teenager. And I write about my journey in Famished.
And so, control became this sort of central idea. It feels like throughout the book of like, if only I can control, the eating, and when you had kids, it was the nap schedule, the feeding routines, and so how did control show up in religion, and how did this idea of control that you learned maybe from your religion help, or maybe not help, but hinder your right relationship with food?
Yeah. I mean, I think that purity culture was a movement that arose in response to the AIDS crisis. It wasn't just something that happened in the church. It was something that happened on a political level in the 1990s. And so purity culture is not just traditional sexual ethics, but one of the like main teachings in it is that you have to be in tight control of your body, and it's especially directed toward women. In purity culture, usually men are kind of painted as these like animalistic people who are in charge, but they can't control themselves. And so you women who are like more pure and angelic, you are the gatekeepers. You are the ones who need to keep these animals in line, who you also have to submit to. And so like a lot of these, like, I mean, it's mind boggling for a young person to like have to navigate these contrasting things. But in that milieu, like I learned that being a good woman, being a good Christian meant that you controlled yourself. And so, and that translated to like, I mean, all areas like self-discipline. Like one of the ways you showed that you were a Christian was that you worked really hard and you were always kind. You always had a smile on your face. Like, it was a lot of like keeping up appearances. I know that there were pastors who talked about grace and forgiveness, but I'm not sure they really understood it, because it was always kind of an afterthought. It was always kind of like, but don't let things get out of hand.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that was the theology that I was brought up with. And that theology is really damaging.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, and I think it's too, growing up in the evangelical culture myself, like, the world is bad. Our bodies are bad. Our bodies need to be tamed or put under control. Like there's a verse from Paul that I can't recall to mind, but, controlling the body, or beating the body into submission almost, I feel like, and so like this idea of bodies being bad and our desires being bad even comes up for you. I think for all of us, like, who are we in this flesh? And so I think it impacts us all.
Yeah. And I think that, so I was in a fundamentalist environment. And so there was a lot of extreme thinking, black and white.
Right.
Everything's a binary. And so it's hard to, like, not all of our desires are good,
No,
right?
right. Yeah.
But in a fundamentalist framework, it's either one or the other. You're not looking for meaning in the midst of like contrast or nuance. And I think that like that verse from Paul, like that needs to be contextualized with so much about like what God says about creation being good and us being made in the image of God. Like, but that wasn't really, at least from the perspective of my child self, that wasn't really something I was taught to do, was to find meaning in nuance or in paradox. It was,
Right.
it was a lot of extreme thinking, plain reading of the Bible rather than something that's contextual.
And so as you've grown and, you're seeking healing, like, how have you sought to move past binary thinking and sort of maybe move towards a more nuanced view? Like, how has that shaped your healing?
I, I mean, I read widely. I like to, my husband and I don't agree on every single issue, and I like to fight.
Okay.
I like
Yeah.
to debate, and I think that like a lot of us can really benefit from like really having honest conversations with people who disagree with us, like honest, loving, like generous conversations with people who don't hold the exact same view, because I think that forces you to step outside of yourself and outside of like your rigid mindset. Um, we had some people over from church a few weeks ago, and I had a conversation in the kitchen with one of my friend's dads, who he and I voted the exact, and we didn't vote the same way.
Right.
And we didn't agree at the end of the conversation, but it was like the most loving, beautiful conversation.
Hmm.
I made us tea about 2 hours into it. We were just standing in the kitchen. I made us
Yeah.
some tea. And at the end of it, like, we're not going to vote the same way. But we hugged each other. It was beautiful. And so like more of that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, those honest conversations, loving conversations, curiosity, is so vital. But even, and so something else that I think I'm curious about, because you talk about it, that, even in the bio you sent me, that there is this significant overlap between modern day diet culture and purity culture. Can you unpack that for us? Because I think for us, for men, for people who don't see these significant overlap, like, what do you mean? And like, how is our society forcing women into something uncomfortable and unhealthy?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, both are really focused on control, controlling appetites, which sometimes, again, like nuance.
Yeah.
We need to control our appetites, but I think that there is, both are kind of in service to patriarchy. Like a lot of time, not all of diet culture, especially like certain branches of wellness culture, but a lot of times, like with diet culture and purity culture, like ultimately you are doing these things in service to men, in service to, like, you are gaining your power through, like your body is a way of reaching who has more power, which is a man. both teach women that their appetite should be small, that there is like a very particular like size or like box that they need to be in. They're
Yeah.
they kind of run parallel to each other.
And you even point out that I found fascinating is that sort of this modern ideal image of women that, has pervaded society of thinness actually is a modern invention that came about post Civil War to actually racialize Black bodies.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, the oppressive nature of all of society, like, just feels overwhelming at times.
Yeah, that's something I learned in my like one of the ways that I tried to heal was through reading just widely. And when I learned about how like the thin ideal emerged during like as a response to the transatlantic slave trade, it was a way of white women differentiating themselves. It just kind of shook me when I realized like this wasn't how, like the thin ideal didn't always exist. It existed as a way for it's part of white supremacy.
Right.
And I have been playing into it my whole life without knowing it, but I'm still complicit. That was really powerful and like horrifying. It was something I really had to wrap my head around. Like how, when, I mean, eating disorders are complicated. It's a mental illness. It's part environment. It's so many different things,
right.
But part of it is like you're chasing power. That is in you are trying to access power. And when I realized that like one of the ways I was trying to access power was like so deeply rooted in white supremacy, that was really like that's something that like I can't just blame other people for either. I can't be like, this is something that people did to me. Like I have to take some accountability for that. And that's something I need to repent from. Like I have been sinned against, but I have also sinned. Like they're both functioning at the same time.
Again, I think it's that nuanced view of like, it's not black or it's not either or, but both and of like, okay, yeah, what's our part? What's our complicity in the systems that, yes, we inherit, but we still function within.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I can't just say you, the church, or you, the patriarchy, or
right.
like I can't say like you did this to me, even though that's part of it. Like I can't also say like it's all okay. It's we are. I was thinking today about how bullied people often bully. Like a lot of times, like we like there's this cycle, and we find ourselves caught in it. Yeah.
The oppressed wants to become the oppressor.
Yeah.
Whereas that's not the healthy healing that needs to happen.
Yeah.
And so like you write this memoir, and yet obviously it includes bigger themes. And so what do you hope this book brings to the world, or to even, to smaller aspect, like to evangelicalism, as we continue to reckon with all of our skeletons in our closets?
I hope it opens up a conversation. I hope that people start unpacking the things that we've kind of added on to Christianity, like how much self-help culture has really taken hold in Christian circles. How much purity culture and diet culture operate by the same logic as the prosperity gospel. I hope that we start talking about those things and we tease them out and we see them not as Christian, but as bad theology that hurts people. I hope that women feel some permission to speak about their own experiences. I always felt like my experiences were embarrassing, but I also really didn't feel like I could move past them until I reckoned with them. So I hope that it gives women permission to talk, and for people to re-examine some of the teachings that they may have just taken for granted. I like I don't think that people always go about teaching these things because they're like evil, horrible people. I think that sometimes there's just like a blind spot, and I would love it if this just shines some light on things that need to be reconsidered.
And I love like the idea of starting conversations. Can we talk about this? Because I think, you touch on it in Famished, where mental disorders have become more okay to talk about, but yet eating disorders, disordered eating, still feels very shameful, or it's not as talked about.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, you point out that there was a study done by a pediatrics journal, and that 1 in 5 kids struggled with disordered eating during COVID. You said 80% of women will struggle with disordered eating at some point in their life. And so, like, why, given its prevalence, why are we so ashamed to talk about it? And I own this for myself. Like, it's not something I explored, my love of food and the table. And I even remember when I started this journey, I had a couple females come up to me and say, Andrew, that's not everyone's experience.
Mm-hmm.
Like, make sure, like, be aware that not everybody loves the table.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And yet I still haven't explored it. And so, like, I own it myself, and, I have family members that struggle with disordered eating. So, like, why is disordered eating still feels like such a taboo for
Yeah.
people to talk about?
I mean, I have a few ideas. I think
Yeah.
part of it is it's connected to sex. Like, I think that part of it is, and like, I think that's part of it. I think that women, especially in conservative cultures, like sex is taboo, and yet they're also taught that their bodies are the most important things about them, like finding a man and then bearing children. Like, your body is kind of like the central thing. So I think there's that double bind where, like, you shouldn't, good Christian women don't talk about sex, but also, like, the body is the most important thing. I think that part of it is disordered eating. It's in cultures of abundance. One way Rene Girard talks about this when he talks about mimicry. In cultures of abundance, one way we demonstrate our superiority is by abstaining from things. And so I think that disordered eating is competitive, and there's like rivalry there. And I think that there's something very icky about that. Like, it does have to do with seeking power. And I think that a lot of people wouldn't want to admit that or feel ashamed about that. But I think we see that even, like, you can kind of hear it when if someone brags about their diet, like, you can kind of hear the moral superiority. And I'm saying that as someone who, like, I'm like not judging. I've felt that. So I think that that component feels icky. It doesn't make the person look the best in that light. I also think that it's often associated with women, and I think that a lot of times things that are associated with women are not taken as seriously, or they're viewed as small or trivial or infantilizing. And I think that disordered eating is people often think of it as like something teenage girls struggle with, and like, we love to make fun of teenage girls. Like, our culture does not take a teenage girl very seriously at all. The media she likes, like, and so I think that especially if someone wants to be taken seriously, they don't want to identify with that struggle because they know that they will be diminished. So I think it's layered.
It's such a hard topic to address. And it's, I even told you this before we started recording. I feel unsure, of how to talk, and have a discussion that helps people shed light, and so that's like owning it and like, okay, how do we move past the discomfort, and how do we help young women who are reckoning with their bodies, and who are they? Like, come to a healthy sense of self. Like, I have two daughters, like it's ever present of like, okay, how do we help them have healthy body images? And one's doing ballet, which, luckily the place she's taking ballet, they feel like they have good, healthy boundaries and, aren't asking girls to do things that make them unhealthy. So yeah, like it's ever present, I think, for us to reckon with, and it's so hard to have a conversation.
Yeah.
You point out just even some of the language in scripture is not helpful, and there was one point that stuck out because it's such a vital image for me of like this table that we're going to banquet in heaven. That you said that imagery can even be triggering. And so like, how have you reckoned with different images in scripture that sort of point to a feast that may not sit well with you, but then like what images could we help people understand of like, God inviting us to a banquet, like, which is something for me that's very comforting, yet for you say it was a triggering image. And so like, how do we be aware just even of language?
Yeah. I don't feel that way anymore. It's not
No, right. Yeah.
But when I wrote this book, I spoke to dozens of women I asked them the question, how did purity culture impact your relationship with your own body? And I spoke to so many women who talked about church potlucks and how judged they felt at them, and how they, especially women who were like in larger bodies, they felt like their morality was under surveillance as they like put different items of food on their plate. I think that being aware that a lot of times people feel that their morality is being judged based upon like the food they're eating or their body size, and like just being aware that that is a cultural force, and it's not absent in the church. In fact, like sometimes it's even more present. It's just been unexamined. I think that I think that being aware of that and acknowledging that food is not always a comforting thing for every person, and it's not their fault. And I think that someday it might be like the idea of like, it's actually very comforting to think about like being in a place where you are not sitting under the burden of all that judgment. I think that's very comforting. But I think that having that conversation about how like what you're experiencing now won't always be what you experience, I think that can be helpful.
And I think too, I love what you said, that, women feel that their morality is being judged by the shape of their body. And yet that's not true for men. Like, the size of overweight pastors aren't somebody who's judged. They're like, oh, well, you just have a rough lifestyle. Like, it's not your fault. Whereas, that's not true. The language we use for females. And so I think just the double standard is just not fair.
Yeah. I mean, and I don't think that men are, I think it's certainly harder. The cultural forces are working against women more, but I don't think that men are immune from body size judgment. I think that we think of self-discipline as good.
Yeah, no.
We believe that self-discipline manifests in a particular body size.
Right.
Yeah, but I mean, but it's certainly a message that is more targeted toward women.
Mm-hmm. It was a couple months ago, I was listening to a podcast, it's the Progressive Christian podcast, and they had a young man on who was just talking about some of these new I don't even know if disorders, there's like, these young men that are struggling with body image issues. And it was really fascinating. So yeah, no, I think it's impacting, men and women differently, but I think within the church, we've seen it impact maybe women. The messaging to women has been very different than it seems than to men.
Yeah, I mean, I think that especially depending on the type of church you're in. So I was in complementarian circles.
Right.
I'm still in many complementarian circles, and I'll challenge it.
Yeah.
But like the messaging there is that like you are submitting to, like, you are supposed to be smaller. Your desires are supposed to sort of be in service to your husband. Like,
Mhm.
um, and I, like, you can take that same logic and apply it to food. Yeah.
I think too, as you moved towards healing in your book and you began to reckon with this journey, something that you talk about is sort of these grounding experiences. One that stuck out to me is during COVID, you were walking in a cemetery with your small kids, and I think you were wrestling with being, torn out of your body, or like, you're, and like the chapel bells sort of re-grounded you. And so, like, what was that process, and like how has sort of this groundedness helped you? And obviously healing looks different for every person, but like for you, this groundedness seemed to be important for your healing.
Yeah. I, for a while, I thought, am I just going to have to leave the church? Like, am I going to have to leave Christianity in order to heal from this?
Right.
Because I felt so closely intertwined. And I really wrestled with that. Like,
Yeah.
like when I was writing the book, I wasn't totally sure. I don't know if I'm going to stay. But I realized that, like, no amount of therapeutic, like, I needed something to take me outside of myself. Like, I wanted I wanted a transcendent experience. I didn't want to keep focusing on myself so much. And that was something that Christianity offered me. Just like the ability to look up and like pray, or like listen to the bells, or like something that took me outside of myself. And I think that a lot of what I experienced in Christianity was like very self-focused, self-improvement focused. And like, I, and I do think that, I think that I wrote a memoir. So
Yeah.
I can clearly, I've reflected on myself,
Right.
but I think that, yeah, like that has been very healing for me, like to not just like get so caught up in everything that's in my head, all these rules, and like just to like look outside.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so now you're raising kids and you're reckoning with your faith and staying, and like what does parenting, I guess two questions. Like, what does parenting look like for you as you're seeking to raise 3 kids? And then what does faith look like?
Like with regards to how I talk
Your
to the
journey. Yeah.
student
Yeah.
bodies, I hope that, so I'm raising them in some similar traditions, and I'm hoping that um, they hear us debate, and we talk about issues, and we say, like, some people believe this, other people's believe this. I try to like show them diversity of thought and like nuance. I try to have compassion for myself and for them. I realized that, like, my oldest son is very similar to how I was. He's a very good little boy. he, he regulates his own screen time, and he practices. I don't even have to tell him to go practice his piano. He just does it. Like, and so I'm on the lookout for what might be under that too, like attempts at control, or I'm on the lookout for that as well. Yeah, I don't know if I answered your question.
No, it's just helpful. Like, yeah, like just as you think back on your journey, like, raising kids just obviously brings up all of our issues, for good and for bad, right? Like, it brings out the best and the worst in us. And so, you know, it's just, I find it interesting to talk to people who've journeyed and seeking to do something different, and like, how do we not pass on, all of our junk, I think but help our kids move towards a healthier, in all aspects, like, of life. I'd be curious if you could go back to your teenage self, or maybe even your pre-teenage self, and talk to her. Like, what would you want to say to her, or what would you have wanted to hear her say to you?
I think that I would like to tell her that if you take a risk and you do something wrong, or someone does something wrong to you, or if you take a risk, there is grace and there is forgiveness. I think that I was so afraid of doing the wrong thing, like making a mistake, or I think I was so hyper vigilant because I don't think I believed that like grace and forgiveness existed. And so I would like to give her some assurance of that. And I don't know that my life would look that different. Maybe it would, maybe it wouldn't. I'm happy with my life. But yeah, but I like so much pain and anguish and like so many like kind of meaningless but also like joyous things that I didn't do because I was so afraid that I was so afraid of the consequences, the potential consequences. Not even, yeah. Yeah, I wish that that had been more of my theological framework. And I guess when I think back, like your question about what I'm doing differently with my children, I keep trying to tell them, and my mom probably said this to me, maybe I just didn't hear it with all the other noise, because I think my mom, she was a really great mom. But I think I would I try to tell my kids that if I will love them no matter what, and you don't have to be perfect for me to keep loving you, and like reassurance of that.
Yeah. You mentioned that, you would hope the experience of grace could be more prevalent. And so what does grace look like for Anna these days?
What does it look like for me? I shouldn't be blanking on this either.
Or like what's a recent experience of grace?
Yeah. I'm thinking about, so I think that something I've struggled with is like having to have everything in order. I feel like I have to have everything figured out for me to be okay, and I think that being messy, even like in my belief system, not having like all the answers for everything, like I've had a lot of like difficulty in church where I feel like if I'm misaligned with something someone in charge is saying, that I am either wrong and I'm a terrible person, or they're wrong and they're a terrible person. Like being okay with just like not everything always has to line up. That sounds small, but that's been like I live a lot of my life in my head.
Yeah.
And so even like going to church and like hearing a pastor say something that I don't totally align with, and not like automatically feeling like one of us is like a bad person. Just being able to like sit in the discord there.
Right.
That feels like grace to be able to do that. Like like I was in a sermon, or I was at church yesterday, and the sermon was on fasting, and I was like, I don't agree with his interpretation of all this stuff. I think religious fasting is fine and good, but like there were things that were missed, and I was like but I walked away from it and I was like, we're allowed to be like two different people who have two different views of the world because of our personal experiences and our reading backgrounds. And like, that doesn't mean either one of us is like bad or wrong. Like, and that feels like grace to be able to like live that way rather than feeling just like this, like anger or frustration or, that sounds small, but that's like a lot of what goes on in my head. So yeah.
I love that too, because I think you mentioned it, and we see it of swapping one fundamentalism for another. Like those of us who were raised fundamentalist or evangelicalism, that we see all the wrongs perpetuated by the tradition. It's easy for us just to go to the other side and think that they're the enemy now, or like everybody's bad who doesn't agree with me. But that's not. And so I love that the grace for you is just recognizing the goodness of disagreement, or that, hey, we're all trying to make sense, and yes, we need correction, but like we can disagree and still find grace.
Yeah.
It's a question I ask all of my guests as we begin to wrap up. What's the story you want the church to tell?
The story about, you mean just in general?
In general, yeah, just whatever, free association.
Oh, I think I want the church to tell, first and foremost, that we're loved, which like sounds really, like that sounds easy, but love is really, really hard. And that we're loved. I also think it's important that we know we're sinners. Like I believe in sin. Like but that there is forgiveness. So I think that, but you can't talk about sin without knowing that you are deeply and like radically loved. Like I think that, I think that you have to have that first thing. Otherwise people just sink.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Appreciate that. And then some fun questions about food just to close. What's one food you refuse to eat?
So my husband used to work in a clinic, like in the backwoods of West Virginia, like in a holler. And one day, I don't know if it was roadkill, but someone made chili out of squirrel, and he brought some of it home. And nope. No squirrel for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't. Like it was iffy about how the squirrel reached its end.
And yeah, and I'm guessing it required more than one squirrel, because squirrels I don't think of as meaty, like.
Yeah. It was squirrel, but
wow.
Yeah. So maybe this. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair. I might join you on that refusal. Yeah.
He tried. He said it was gamey. Yeah.
Okay, he tried it. It was gamey. Okay. Yeah. And then on the other end of the spectrum, what's one of the best things you've ever eaten?
So when I was pregnant with my first son, there was this cafe that's since closed. It was called Let's Eat, and they had this sandwich called an annata, and it was naan bread, and they also put pasta inside it. So one of my friends called it a spaghetti sandwich, but it was spaghetti, then your choice of meat, and then a bunch of different veggies like olives and onion and lettuce, and then like this Thousand Island type dressing. It was delicious, and I really, my first son is probably made out of that. So
okay, that sounds like I've never heard of something quite like that. And
spaghetti sandwich.
With Thousand Island, like the Thousand Island dressing, and sounds unique, but yeah,
it was good.
Yeah. And finally, there's a conversation among chefs about last meals, as in if you knew you only had one more meal left to enjoy, what would it be? And so if Anna had one last meal, like what might be around her table?
I love Indian food. So I would naan bread again. I guess I really like naan bread.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, butter chicken, I know that is boring, but I really like it. And I'm blanking on the name of it, but like the fried onion type thing.
Okay. Yeah. I'm blanking on the name. Yeah.
Yeah. So I would have Indian food.
No, it's a good choice. Yes. Indian. Yeah. All of it.
Yeah.
Well, Anna, I've appreciated this conversation. I've appreciated your honesty, your vulnerability, your courage. And so if people want to learn more about your work or just follow you, where can they find you?
Yeah. Well, my memoir Famished is out on December 9th. It examines the rhyming scripts of evangelical purity culture and diet culture. So you can order that anywhere you buy your books.
Yep.
And then you can find me on Substack and Instagram at Anna J. Rollins or at annajrollins.com.
Awesome. Yes. Yeah. Please do buy Famished. It's a really fascinating look. It's published by Erdman's, available everywhere, December 9th. And so if you've enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing, leaving a review, or sharing it with others. Thanks for joining us on this episode of The Biggest Table, where we explore what it means to be transformed by God's love around the table and through food. Until next time, bye.